Why being poor is expensive. Imagine two people standing in the exact same store. They both need a pair of shoes. The first person buys a pair for $150. The second person buys a pair for $35. At first glance, the second person looks smarter. He just saved $115. But 5 years later, something strange happens. The first person is still wearing the same shoes. The second person has bought 7 different pairs. And somehow, the person with less money spent more. Most people think being poor means not having enough money. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is that being poor is expensive. And once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. You notice it in grocery stores, you notice it in apartment leases, you notice it in bank accounts, you notice it in every corner of modern life, because the people with the least money are often forced to pay the highest price, and it starts with a word almost nobody talks about: margin. Most financial advice assumes you have options. Buy quality, invest early, wait patiently, think long term. But those choices only exist when you have margin. When you don't have margin, survival becomes expensive. Imagine your car breaks down on a Tuesday morning. You need it for work. The repair costs $800. Someone with savings pays $800. The problem disappears. Someone without savings puts it on a credit card. Now the repair doesn't cost $800. It costs $800 plus interest, plus stress, plus months of payments, the same repair. 2 completely different prices, and that's when you begin to understand the hidden rule of money. The less margin you have, the more expensive every mistake becomes. The same thing happens with cars. A wealthy person buys a reliable car. A struggling person buys the cheapest car available. The cheap car breaks down more often, needs more repairs, creates more emergencies, consumes more money. The expensive car ends up being cheaper, not because the owner is smarter, because the owner had options. And options are one of the most valuable assets in the world. But the real trap isn't shoes, and it isn't cars. It's time. Nobody warns you about that part, because time doesn't appear on a receipt. Imagine 2 people miss a paycheck. The first person has 6 months of savings. The second person has 6 days. One feels annoyed. The other feels panic. One updates a spreadsheet. The other can't sleep. Same event, different reality, and eventually something begins to happen. When every dollar matters, every decision becomes heavier. A surprise bill isn't inconvenient, it's terrifying. A medical expense isn't frustrating, it's a crisis. A broken appliance isn't bad luck, it's a disaster. And over time, your brain adapts. You stop thinking about next year, because this week is already demanding everything you have. This is why poverty becomes so difficult to escape. Not because people stop trying, not because people stop working, because constant emergencies steal their ability to think long term. Every month becomes a fire to put out, and fires are expensive. Imagine you're drowning. Someone standing safely on shore shouts, "Just swim toward land." Technically, they're right, but advice sounds very different when you're underwater. That's what most financial advice feels like. People explain wealth from the perspective of stability, not survival, and survival changes everything. A wealthy person can wait, a poor person usually can't. A wealthy person can buy quality, a poor person often has to buy cheap. A wealthy person can absorb mistakes, a poor person pays interest on them, and every one of those disadvantages compounds, just like wealth compounds. In fact, compounding isn't always positive. Debt compounds, stress compounds, bad decisions compound, emergencies compound, and eventually you begin paying what economists call the poverty premium, the extra cost attached to having less, higher interest rates, higher insurance costs, higher fees, lower quality products, more repairs, more penalties. Everything costs a little more, and over decades, a little more becomes a lot more. The cruel part is that most people never notice it happening. When they see a wealthy person buying a $200 pair of shoes, they assume it's luxury. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's the cheaper decision. The difference is that one person can afford the long term, the other person can only afford today. And today is usually the most expensive option. Then something happens that almost nobody talks about. Poverty starts affecting your decisions before it affects your bank account. You begin avoiding risks, avoiding opportunities, avoiding investments, avoiding anything that could go wrong, because when you have no margin, You can't afford uncertainty. Imagine someone offers you an opportunity that could double your income in 2 years. Maybe it requires learning a new skill. Maybe it requires taking a temporary pay cut. Maybe it requires moving to a better city. A wealthy person can consider it. A struggling person often can't. Not because they lack ambition, because they lack breathing room. And breathing room changes everything. That's the part people miss. Wealth isn't just money. Wealth is flexibility. Wealth is time. Wealth is the ability to make decisions based on what's best.